So my name is Zoe Para. I'm from the US. I've been in China, living in China for 9 months now. I got here in January to study Chinese abroad while I figured out what I wanted to do for college. Yeah, I go to Jiaotong University and I'll probably be in Shanghai for 3 more years in an intensive language program focusing on fluency. Okay, so I think 4 words to define culture would be language, history, behavior, and education. So I first came to China when I was 15 years old, just coming from a school group in the US, came to tour for a little bit, do all the tourist attractions. In Beijing was our first stop, and I think my first immediate culture shock was the surprise at seeing foreigners in the city. I wasn't used to having people taking pictures of my group. I came with a group of American students, about 10 of us, and coming from a country like the US where we're used to a lot of diversity, it was interesting to see how surprised people were to see foreigners in the city. There was also a lot of just, I don't know, I guess social behaviors were a lot different coming here. From a westernized country, it's very, very interesting to come into China. You definitely have to travel with an open mind because there's a lot of mostly social behaviors that are shocking at first, but you get used to it really fast. I think the thing that still shocks me the most would be a lot of the social behaviors, such as like spitting on the streets is not something you would see in the US at all, or the pushing to get on metro, again, not something. It's just a different, I think, way of thinking socially than I'm used to from the US. So comparing the US to China, obviously first off, language is incredibly different. Chinese is an impossible language for me to be learning right now. Coming from like a very monolingual family, nobody else in my family speaks any other languages. It's really interesting to go not only from learning, not knowing any other languages, but to jumping to a language as different as Chinese. But it has an incredibly different historical background, so there's really no crossover at all, which is rough. Historically, it's actually one of my favorite things about China is the US is such a young country. You don't really realize how young it is until you come to a place with such an old, rich, historical culture as China has. So that's actually one of my favorite parts about being here, is like seeing the ancient history mixed in with the modern culture. Education-wise, the US is incredibly lax compared to China. Mostly, I think, based on the competition level, based on population here. The US is not a country that many other countries look up to for education, and China has a much more strict system than we have. Behavior-wise, as I talked about a little while ago, there's a lot of social behaviors that are different when you're getting over here, but you get pretty used to them. In the US, I think I just take for granted all of the very, very westernized, polite culture, and that's something you have to kind of not forget coming over here, but just like suspend judgment on when you're here. So when I first got here, obviously the language was a big shocker. I didn't really speak any Chinese. I had a couple sentences, but completely useless when I actually came overseas. I did a lot of miming. I moved in with a host family at first, and we pretty much mimed everything from like what times I'm allowed to use the shower to like when they wanted to wash my clothes. We just mimed it all. But as I got a better grasp on the language, I speak much more now, and a good amount of people here you can end up speaking Chinglish to if you don't have a good overlap. Like they may know a word in English that you don't know in Chinese, or the other way around. And most of the time you can get your point across. And when in doubt, you dictionary it on your phone and then just show them the characters. And it's great. So advice I would give is just, I guess, coming with an open mind from everything from social behaviors to the food you're eating on the streets. Be really open-minded about it, don't think too hard about it. And I would recommend just learning as much as you possibly can about the culture and the language while you're here, because it's a lot easier to appreciate how amazing this place is if you get a better grasp of the language and the history and the culture, especially the language. It's a lot easier to get by if you work on the language.